Welcome to Softly Curious. This is a slow place, created to be entered gently rather than crossed quickly. Tonight, we begin with cats, not as companions chosen for affection, not as symbols shaped by culture or media, but as living beings whose relationship with humans developed quietly, without design, instruction, or command. Cats did not arrive in human history as helpers or tools. They arrived as observers, adapting themselves to spaces that humans unintentionally created, and staying long enough to become familiar without ever becoming fully owned. When we think about domesticated animals, we often imagine a process guided by intention. Dogs were bred for cooperation, livestock for food, and horses for movement and labor. Cats do not fit easily into this pattern. Their presence alongside humans was not the result of a decision made by people, but of a slow alignment of needs, environments, and tolerances. Cats were not shaped to serve a role. Instead, they discovered a role that required very little change. To understand this relationship, we must move far back in time, to the earliest moments when humans began to settle rather than roam. As nomadic groups transitioned into agricultural communities, particularly in regions such as the Fertile Crescent, new conditions emerged. Grain storage attracted rodents, and rodents attracted predators. Among these predators was a small wildcat species, known today as Felis sylvestris libica. This animal, native to parts of the Middle East and North Africa, possessed traits that allowed it to tolerate proximity to humans without becoming dependent on them. Unlike larger predators or more territorial species, Felis sylvestris libica displayed a flexible behavioral range. It could hunt alone, retreat easily, and avoid direct conflict. These qualities made it well suited to the margins of human settlements, where it could benefit from abundant prey without competing directly with people. Over time, individuals that were less fearful gained access to safer environments, while humans benefited indirectly from reduced rodent populations. This mutual advantage required no training, no tools, and no hierarchy. Archaeological evidence supports this gradual process. One of the earliest known signs of a close human-cat relationship comes from a burial site in Cyprus, dated to approximately 7500 BCE. In this grave, a cat was placed deliberately beside a human, suggesting recognition rather than utility. The cat was not treated as vermin, nor as a disposable animal. Its placement indicates that it held a distinct presence within the human world, even at this early stage. Importantly, this burial occurred in a region where cats were not native, implying that humans had already begun transporting them intentionally or semi-intentionally. Despite this growing proximity, cats were never subjected to the same selective breeding pressures as other domesticated animals. Their physical form changed very little over thousands of years. Modern domestic cats remain strikingly similar to their wild ancestors in skeletal structure, hunting behavior, and sensory priorities. This continuity suggests that cats were never reshaped to fit human systems. Instead, human environments adjusted around them, accommodating an animal that refused to be fully altered. As agricultural societies expanded, cats followed naturally. They moved along trade routes, coastal regions, and river systems, often traveling aboard ships or settling near ports. Their spread was not coordinated, nor was it driven by cultural doctrine. Cats thrived wherever human activity produced conditions favorable to their survival. This adaptability allowed them to appear across continents without losing their behavioral core. A cat living near an ancient granary and one living in a modern apartment share far more similarities than differences. By the time cats began to appear in religious imagery, they had already lived alongside humans for thousands of years. Their presence in sacred symbols did not mark the beginning of this relationship, but reflected a familiarity that had slowly developed through everyday life. Cats were given meaning because they were already known, already trusted, and already woven quietly into human spaces. Outside of Egypt, cats continued to occupy practical yet understated roles. In farming communities, they managed rodent populations without instruction. In urban environments, they adapted to dense human activity while maintaining distance. On ships, they became quiet companions during long voyages, valued not for affection, but for effectiveness. Yet even in these contexts, cats were rarely trained or commanded. Their usefulness came from instinct rather than obedience. This lack of formal training is a defining feature of feline domestication. While dogs evolved to respond to human cues, cats retained a self-directed behavioral model. They learned to read environments rather than commands, adjusting their actions based on space, sound, and routine. This allowed them to coexist with humans without becoming dependent. Even today, domestic cats retain the ability to survive independently, a trait uncommon among fully domesticated species. Cats' independence often leads to the perception that they are aloof or indifferent. In reality, this behavior reflects an evolutionary strategy that prioritizes observation and timing. Cats interact selectively, choosing moments of engagement rather than responding continuously. This makes their companionship feel subtle, sometimes even invisible. Yet this subtlety is precisely what allowed cats to persist alongside humans without conflict. They did not compete for attention or resources. They occupied the spaces in between. Over centuries, this relationship stabilized. Cats became a constant presence rather than a specialized tool. They did not fragment into distinct working breeds, nor did they develop roles tied to specific human industries. A cat remained a cat, regardless of context. This consistency explains why cats feel timeless. They have changed little because they did not need to change. Their strategy worked early, and it continues to work today. The quiet origins of cats also shaped human expectations. Unlike animals bred for service, cats taught humans to accept companionship without control. They challenged the assumption that usefulness requires obedience. Instead, they offered coexistence on equal terms. Humans learned, often unconsciously, to adjust their behavior, allowing cats to approach or withdraw as they chose. This mutual adjustment created a relationship based on tolerance rather than dominance. As societies grew more complex, cats remained present but rarely central. They did not lead armies, pull plows, or define economies. Instead, they stayed near hearths, storehouses, and sleeping spaces. Their contribution was quiet, their presence steady. This understated role allowed them to survive cultural shifts that eliminated or repurposed other animals. Cats did not depend on a single function. They depended on adaptability. Even during periods when cats were viewed with suspicion, such as parts of medieval Europe, they never disappeared from human life. While attitudes toward them changed, their everyday presence continued quietly. Cats remained in homes, barns, streets, and ships, controlling pests and adapting to human environments without drawing attention to themselves. They survived not because they were celebrated, but because they were useful without asking to be noticed. What sets cats apart is not mystery in a dramatic sense, but restraint. They do not constantly seek interaction, nor do they fully withdraw. Instead, they move between presence and absence, choosing when to be near and when to remain distant. This behavior reflects the way cats entered human history in the first place. They did not demand space or permission. They stayed close enough to benefit, yet far enough to remain independent. As we continue, we will begin to look more closely at how this long pattern shaped the way cats experience the world. Their senses, routines, and behaviors still carry traces of these early conditions. The origins of cats are not confined to the past. They are visible in every modern cat, and the way it moves through space, observes quietly, and lives alongside humans without ever fully belonging to them. Cats did not merely remain near human settlements. Over time, they learned to read them. Early villages were not quiet or orderly places. They were filled with shifting routines, seasonal work, animals, fires, and storage spaces that changed constantly. Cats that stayed close had to navigate these environments carefully. They learned which areas were safe, which times of day brought activity, and which human behaviors signaled threat or tolerance. This ability to observe without interfering became one of their most defining traits. Unlike animals that relied on humans for direct care, cats refined their survival by staying alert rather than attached. They positioned themselves at the edges of activity, near doorways, walls, or elevated surfaces, where they could watch without being seen. This habit did not come from fear alone, but from efficiency. Remaining unnoticed reduced conflict and allowed cats to move freely through shared spaces. Over generations, this quiet positioning became instinctive. As human societies grew denser, cats adapted again. In towns and early cities, space became limited, noise increased, and movement patterns grew more complex. Cats responded not by retreating, but by becoming more precise. Their movements grew lighter, their routes more deliberate. They learned to navigate narrow paths, rooftops, and interior spaces without drawing attention. This adaptability allowed cats to remain present, even as human environments became increasingly artificial. One reason cats succeeded where many animals failed is their flexible social structure. Cats do not rely on strict hierarchies. They can live alone, in loose groups, or in overlapping territories without requiring constant coordination. This made them well suited to human settlements, where population density fluctuated and stability was never guaranteed. Cats could adjust their level of social interaction depending on circumstances, without stress or loss of function. Food availability also shaped this relationship. Early cats did not depend on humans to feed them. Instead, they relied on prey that followed human activity. This indirect connection preserved independence. Cats did not associate humans with survival in the same way dogs did. As a result, they never developed the same behavioral dependency. Even today, this origin explains why cats often maintain hunting behaviors regardless of how well they are fed. Over time, humans began to recognize individual cats, even if they did not formally claim ownership. A cat might be known by appearance, behavior, or preferred location rather than by name. This recognition did not come with control. Cats were tolerated, sometimes welcomed, but rarely managed. This loose form of acceptance allowed cats to remain integrated without becoming confined, reinforcing their unique position among domesticated animals. As cats spread into new regions, climate played a role in shaping subtle differences. In colder environments, cats sought warmth near human structures. In warmer regions, they adjusted activity patterns to avoid heat. These changes did not alter their core behavior, but they demonstrated an ability to align daily rhythms with local conditions. This sensitivity to environment, rather than loyalty to place, helped cats thrive across continents. Despite centuries of proximity, cats never lost the ability to withdraw completely. When conditions became hostile, they could retreat to feral states within a generation. This capacity to move between domestic and wild life is rare, and reveals how lightly domestication touched them. Cats were never fully absorbed into human systems. They hovered at the boundary, benefiting from closeness while retaining escape. This boundary existence also shaped how humans perceived cats. They were familiar, yet unpredictable, useful, yet self-directed. Unlike animals that clearly belonged to farms, homes, or fields, cats occupied multiple roles at once. This ambiguity prevented them from being fully categorized. Cats resisted simple labels, which may explain why they have been alternately admired, ignored, feared, and accepted throughout history. By the time cats became a common presence in human life, their role was already defined by absence of control. They stayed not because they were commanded, but because the environment suited them. This quiet decision, repeated across thousands of years, established the foundation for the relationship we recognize today. Before cats were companions, symbols, or pets, they were neighbors, sharing space, observing quietly, and remaining exactly as they were. As cats settled quietly alongside early human communities, their role began to shift in subtle ways. They were no longer just animals passing through the edges of settlements. Over time, they became familiar presences, recognized without being claimed. This recognition did not immediately produce stories, symbols, or beliefs. At first, it produced something much simpler: tolerance. Cats were allowed to remain because they caused little disruption and quietly solved a problem humans struggled to manage: the constant presence of rodents in stored food and living spaces. In the earliest agricultural societies, cats occupied a practical position without ceremony. They were not celebrated, named, or elevated. They were simply there. In places like the Fertile Crescent, where grain storage became essential for survival, cats followed opportunity rather than instruction. They appeared where food was stored, where rodents gathered, and where shelter existed. Humans noticed the result: fewer pests, less loss, and gradually accepted the animal responsible, without formal agreement or control. As villages expanded into towns, and towns into early cities, cats adapted with them. In Mesopotamia, along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, dense settlements created complex environments filled with narrow paths, stacked structures, and constant human movement. Cats learned to navigate these spaces efficiently, using height, shadow, and timing to move unnoticed. Their ability to live within crowded environments without interfering made them unusually well suited to early urban life. Ancient Egypt marks a turning point in how cats were perceived, though not in how they behaved. By the time cats became culturally visible in Egypt, they had already been living near humans for thousands of years. What changed was not the relationship itself, but how humans began to interpret it. Cats became associated with protection of the home, fertility, and balance. The goddess Bastet, often shown with feline features, represented warmth, safety, and domestic harmony. Cats were protected by law, and harming one could result in severe punishment. Despite this elevated status, cats in Egypt were not transformed into obedient animals. Art and records show cats moving freely, hunting, resting, and interacting on their own terms. They were admired for their behavior, as it already existed, not reshaped to fit a role. Egyptian culture did not domesticate cats further. It acknowledged what cats already were. This distinction is important because it shows that reverence followed familiarity, not the other way around. Outside Egypt, cats spread widely through trade and travel. They moved along Mediterranean routes, appearing in Greece, Rome, and coastal settlements across Europe. Roman ships often carried cats to control rodents during long voyages, and these animals frequently disembarked and remained near ports. In this way, cats entered new regions quietly, without fanfare or formal introduction. They did not arrive as exotic animals, but as useful, unnoticed companions. In ancient Rome, cats never reached the symbolic status they held in Egypt, but they were accepted as practical animals. They lived in homes, warehouses, and military camps, especially in areas where food storage attracted pests. Roman writers mentioned cats less frequently than dogs or livestock, which itself reveals something important. Cats did not need explanation. Their role was understood without commentary, and their presence became ordinary. As the Roman Empire declined and Europe entered the early medieval period, human attitudes toward cats began to shift. In some regions, cats became associated with superstition, suspicion, and fear. Folklore linked them to the night, the unseen, and later to witchcraft. This change in perception did not come from cat behavior, but from human attempts to explain what they did not control. Cats moved silently, appeared at night, and resisted training, all traits that became uncomfortable in cultures increasingly shaped by rigid belief systems. Even during these periods of suspicion, cats did not disappear. They remained in barns, farms, ships, and cities because they continued to serve a quiet function. Rodents did not vanish simply because beliefs changed, and cats remained one of the most effective solutions. This persistence demonstrates a key pattern in cat history. Cultural attitudes fluctuated, but practical coexistence endured. Cats survived not because they were loved, but because they were needed. In parts of Asia, cats followed different paths into human life. In China, cats were valued for their role in protecting silk production by controlling rodents. Written records from the Tang Dynasty mention cats living in homes and storage areas, recognized for their usefulness rather than affection. In Japan, cats entered human spaces through trade and gradually became associated with protection and good fortune. The Maneki Neko figure, the raised paw cat, emerged much later, reflecting an already established presence rather than creating it. Across these regions, one pattern remains consistent. Cats were rarely integrated into formal systems of work or hierarchy. They were not assigned tasks, trained extensively, or bred for specific functions. Instead, they adapted themselves to human environments while remaining largely unchanged. This allowed them to move easily between cultures, adjusting to local conditions without losing their essential behavior. In colonial settlements, cats again occupied familiar roles. They lived near homes, food stores, and workplaces, controlling pests without supervision. They were neither wild nor fully domestic, often moving freely between households and outdoor spaces. This flexibility allowed cats to integrate into new environments rapidly, regardless of climate or culture. By the modern era, cats had become a permanent feature of human life across the globe. Yet even as societies changed dramatically, industrializing and urbanizing at unprecedented speed, cats remained remarkably consistent. They adapted to apartments, factories, and then cities by applying the same strategies they had used for thousands of years: observation, timing, and selective interaction. What makes the history of cats distinct is not a single moment of domestication or a dramatic shift in role. It is the absence of such moments. Cats did not enter history through command, training, or transformation. They entered through proximity and remained through usefulness and restraint. Their story is not one of domination or dependence, but of coexistence. As human societies grew more complex, cats continued to resist simple classification. They were not livestock, not tools, and not fully companions in the way other animals were. This ambiguity allowed them to survive cultural upheavals that eliminated or repurposed other species. Cats required very little from humans and offered something subtle in return. This balance proved remarkably stable. By the time cats became common household animals in the modern sense, their relationship with humans was already ancient. What appeared new was simply visibility. Photography, writing, and later media made cats more noticeable, but did not fundamentally change their role. They remained animals that lived nearby, shared space, and followed their own rhythm. This long and uneven history explains why cats feel both familiar and distant today. They have always occupied that space. Their presence in human history is marked not by loud events or dramatic shifts, but by quiet continuity. They stayed when it suited them, left when it did not, and returned when conditions aligned again. As we move forward, understanding this history helps explain the behavior we see in cats today. Their senses, routines, and reactions are shaped by thousands of years of living alongside humans without surrendering independence. The past is not behind them. It continues quietly in every shared space. As cats became more visible in human settlements, their presence began to influence daily routines in quiet but lasting ways. In many societies, cats were not formally acknowledged, yet their absence was noticed immediately. Rodent populations rose, food stores suffered, and disease spread more easily. Without needing explanation, cats became part of the background systems that kept early communities functioning, even when their role went unrecorded. In port cities, cats gained particular importance. Coastal trade hubs such as Alexandria, Carthage, and later Venice relied heavily on stored grain and long-distance shipping. Rats posed a constant threat, and cats provided one of the most reliable forms of control. Ships often carried several cats, not as companions, but as safeguards. When vessels docked, some cats remained behind, settling near warehouses and markets, extending their reach into new regions. Over centuries, this movement created a global presence unlike that of almost any other domesticated animal. Cats did not spread through intentional export or breeding programs. They followed trade, migration, and commerce, embedding themselves wherever human activity created opportunity. This explains why cats appear across continents with remarkable behavioral consistency. They did not need cultural acceptance to survive. They needed conditions. In rural areas, cats lived at the edges of farms and barns, often moving freely between properties. Ownership was fluid. A cat might sleep in one place, hunt in another, and feed wherever food was available. This flexible arrangement suited both humans and cats. Farmers benefited from pest control, and cats retained independence. This pattern persisted well into the modern era and remains visible today in many parts of the world. As cities grew during the Industrial Revolution, cats faced new challenges. Noise increased, spaces shrank, and human activity intensified. Yet cats adapted once again. They shifted activity to quieter hours, used vertical space more effectively, and learned to navigate complex interiors. Factories, warehouses, and dense housing created new hunting grounds, allowing cats to remain relevant even as human life became increasingly mechanical. During this period, attitudes toward animals began to change. Companion animals became more common, particularly among urban populations. Cats slowly transitioned from background pest controllers to recognized household animals. This shift did not happen all at once. Many cats continued to live semi-independently, moving between streets and homes. The modern idea of the indoor pet developed gradually, shaped as much by architecture and lifestyle as by affection. Scientific interest in cats also emerged relatively late. Unlike dogs or livestock, cats were studied less extensively for much of history. Their behavior was often dismissed as instinctual or inscrutable. Only in the 20th century did researchers begin to examine cats systematically, exploring their social structures, communication methods, and cognitive abilities. These studies revealed that cats were neither solitary nor antisocial, but selectively social, choosing interactions carefully. This selective social behavior mirrors their historical role. Cats were never required to perform constant tasks or respond to commands. Their interactions with humans developed through proximity rather than training. As a result, they learned to read human behavior subtly, responding to tone, movement, and routine rather than explicit signals. This sensitivity allowed them to coexist across cultures without needing shared language or rules. By the late 20th century, cats had become one of the most common companion animals worldwide. Yet their historical pattern remained intact. Even as indoor living became more common, cats retained behaviors shaped by thousands of years of semi-independent existence. They continued to patrol spaces, observe quietly, and withdraw when overstimulated. Modern life changed their environment, but not their fundamental approach. What stands out in this long history is continuity rather than transformation. Cats did not reinvent themselves for each era. They applied the same strategies repeatedly: adaptability, restraint, and selective engagement. Human societies changed dramatically, yet cats found ways to remain relevant without altering who they were. This quiet persistence explains their lasting presence more than any single cultural moment. This historical backdrop helps explain why cats behave as they do today. Their sensory priorities, routines, and social boundaries are not random traits, but the result of a long coexistence shaped by human history without ever being fully controlled by it. These patterns continue quietly in modern life, visible in how cats move through spaces, respond to people, and maintain distance even within shared environments. Cats do not experience the world the way humans do. This difference is not subtle, and it explains much of what people often describe as strange, distant, or unpredictable behavior. To a cat, space, sound, light, and movement form a landscape that is organized differently, prioritized differently, and interpreted through senses that evolved for survival rather than communication. Understanding this perceptual world is not about turning cats into puzzles to solve, but about recognizing that their actions are logical responses to information we often do not register at all. Vision is one of the most discussed aspects of how cats perceive their environment, particularly their ability to see in low light. Cats are not able to see in complete darkness, but their eyes are highly adapted to twilight and nighttime conditions. A structure called the tapetum lucidum, a reflective layer behind the retina, allows light to pass through the photoreceptors twice, increasing sensitivity in dim conditions. This adaptation means that cats can navigate confidently at dawn, dusk, and night, times when humans rely heavily on artificial light. This visual sensitivity changes how cats move. In low light, small movements become more noticeable than fixed objects. A cat may ignore a stationary person, but immediately track the slight shift of a hand or foot. This explains why cats often appear to react suddenly, as if responding to nothing. They are not responding to nothing. They are responding to movement that falls below the threshold of human awareness. Cats also perceive depth and distance differently. Their eyes are positioned forward, providing strong binocular vision at close range, which is ideal for judging distance during short bursts of movement, such as jumping or pouncing. This is why cats are precise climbers and jumpers. They calculate space instinctively, relying on visual cues refined over thousands of years. When a cat pauses before a jump, it is not hesitating emotionally. It is measuring. Hearing plays an even more significant role in how cats interpret the world. Cats can detect frequencies far higher than those audible to humans. While the average human hearing range tops out around 20,000 hertz, cats can hear sounds reaching approximately 64,000 hertz. This allows them to detect the high-pitched noises made by small prey, such as rodents, even when those sounds are faint or distant. This heightened hearing explains many everyday behaviors. Cats often turn their heads toward spaces that seem silent to us. They may become alert, freeze, or reposition themselves in response to sounds we cannot hear. Their ears are also independently mobile, capable of rotating to pinpoint sound direction with remarkable accuracy. This ability allows cats to construct a three-dimensional auditory map of their environment, continuously updating it as sounds change. Because of this sensitivity, cats are also more affected by noise than humans realize. Sudden loud sounds, high-pitched electronic noises, or overlapping audio signals can overwhelm their auditory system. This is why cats may avoid rooms with constant noise, such as televisions, appliances, or busy conversations. Silence to a cat is not emptiness. It is clarity. Smell forms another critical layer of perception. Cats rely heavily on scent to understand space, identity, and change. Their sense of smell is far more developed than that of humans, though not as dominant as in dogs. Cats use scent not only to identify food or danger, but to map their environment. Every object, surface, and being carries information, and cats read this information continuously. Specialized scent receptors, including the vomeronasal organ, also known as Jacobson's organ, allow cats to process pheromones. When a cat opens its mouth slightly, and appears to grimace, a behavior known as the feline response. It is directing sense toward this organ for deeper analysis. This process provides information about other animals, emotional states, and environmental changes that humans cannot perceive. This reliance on scent explains why cats respond strongly to changes that seem insignificant to people. A new object in a familiar space, a moved piece of furniture, or a visitor carrying unfamiliar smells can disrupt a cat's sense of order. The visual change may be minimal, but the scent landscape has shifted dramatically. Cats respond not to novelty, but to altered information. Touch is another sensory channel that shapes how cats interact with the world. Cats' bodies are covered in sensitive nerve endings, particularly around the face, paws, and tail. Whiskers or vibrissae are not decorative features. They are sensory tools that detect air movement, spatial boundaries, and subtle changes in the environment. Whiskers help cats navigate narrow spaces and assess whether their bodies can pass through openings. This tactile sensitivity also explains why cats may become overstimulated by prolonged physical contact. While humans often interpret petting as purely positive, a cat experiences continuous touch as accumulating sensory input. What begins as pleasant can quickly become overwhelming. When a cat pulls away, flicks its tail, or suddenly leaves, it is not rejecting affection. It is responding to sensory saturation. Cats integrate all of these senses continuously. They do not process information in isolation. Sight, sound, smell, and touch blend into a single awareness that is constantly updating. This integrated perception allows cats to respond quickly and efficiently, but it also means they are always alert to changes. Stillness, from a cat's perspective, is not inactivity. It is observation. This constant observation explains why cats often choose elevated positions. Height provides visual advantage, reduces unpredictable contact, and enhances the ability to detect movement and sound. From a high vantage point, a cat can monitor its environment without participating in it. This is not dominance behavior. It is perceptual optimization. Time is also experienced differently by cats. Their daily rhythms are shaped by short cycles of activity and rest, rather than long periods of sustained effort. Cats are crepuscular by nature, meaning they are most active during dawn and dusk. This pattern aligns with the activity of prey animals and with lighting conditions that favor feline vision. As a result, cats may appear restless early in the morning or late at night, times when human activity slows. These rhythms are not habits formed through routine alone. They are biologically reinforced. Even indoor cats with consistent feeding schedules often retain this pattern. Their bodies are tuned to environmental cues rather than clocks. This is why cats may wake suddenly, move briefly, and then return to rest. Their energy is distributed in bursts rather than blocks. Understanding this sensory world also clarifies why cats seem selective in their attention. A cat may ignore a person calling its name, but respond instantly to a subtle sound or movement. This is not disobedience. It is prioritization. Cats attend to information that signals relevance or change, not to social cues by default. Because cats perceive the world so differently, they often appear to act independently of human intention. In reality, they are responding accurately to a sensory environment that humans do not fully share. Their behavior makes sense within their perceptual framework, even when it feels confusing to an observer. This perceptual independence is one reason cats have maintained autonomy throughout their history. They were never required to attune themselves to human commands because they relied on their own sensory systems. Their success depended on awareness rather than instruction. This pattern continues in modern settings, where cats navigate complex environments filled with artificial light, electronic noise, and constant movement. Despite these changes, the core structure of feline perception remains intact. Cats continue to prioritize subtle cues, respond to shifts in their environment, and maintain distance when sensory input becomes overwhelming. They do not seek stimulation for its own sake. They seek balance. As we observe cats today, their behavior can seem calm or detached. But beneath this surface lies an active, finely tuned perceptual system that never fully rests. Cats are always reading their surroundings, filtering information, and adjusting their position accordingly. This is not anxiety. It is attentiveness shaped by evolution. In recognizing how cats perceive the world, we begin to understand why they move the way they do, choose the spaces they choose, and interact selectively. Their actions are not random, and they are not designed to confuse. They are logical responses to a sensory reality that operates just beyond human perception. Cats also perceive space as something dynamic rather than fixed. A room does not remain the same to a cat throughout the day. Light shifts, sounds travel differently, and scents fade or intensify. Because of this, cats regularly revisit familiar places as if they were new. This is not confusion or habit. It is recalibration. A cat checks whether the space still communicates the same information it did before. For a cat, familiarity is something that must be confirmed, not assumed. This is one reason cats often pause at doorways or thresholds. These areas concentrate sensory change. Air movement, temperature, sound, and scent all shift at once. A doorway is not just an opening, but a boundary between two sensory environments. When a cat stops there, it is processing contrast. What looks like hesitation is actually assessment. The pause allows the cat to prepare for a different sensory state. Cats are especially sensitive to vertical space. Height changes how sound arrives, how movement is detected, and how scent disperses. From elevated positions, cats receive information earlier and with less interference. This explains why they seek shelves, cabinets, and ledges, even when there is no obvious reward. Height simplifies perception. It reduces noise in the sensory field. Being above the environment makes it easier to read. Movement patterns are also guided by perception rather than intention. Cats often follow the same paths through a space, not because they are rigid, but because those paths have predictable sensory outcomes. The floor texture, airflow, and sound reflections are already known. Deviating from these paths introduces uncertainty. Familiar routes allow cats to move efficiently while conserving attention. Predictability lowers the need for constant reassessment. Cats also perceive human behavior primarily through motion and tone, not language. Facial expressions and words matter less than posture, speed, and rhythm. A slow, predictable movement signals safety. Sudden changes in speed or direction signal alert. This is why a cat may respond calmly to silence, but react strongly to an unexpected shift, even if the sound is not loud. Movement carries more meaning than words in a cat's world. This perceptual focus explains why cats often prefer indirect interaction. Sitting nearby, rather than facing someone directly, allows them to monitor without overload. Direct eye contact, especially prolonged, carries intensity in the feline perceptual system. A slow blink reduces that intensity, signaling that no immediate response is required. This exchange operates below conscious thought, guided by sensory comfort rather than emotion. Distance helps keep the interaction balanced. Environmental consistency matters deeply to cats. When familiar objects are moved, the visual change is only part of the disruption. The scent map changes, sound reflections shift, and movement patterns are altered. A cat walking through a rearranged room is not being stubborn. It is reconstructing its understanding of the space from the ground up. The room must be relearned, not simply re-entered. Cats also perceive time through repetition rather than schedules. Events become meaningful when they repeat with similar sensory cues. The sound of footsteps at a certain hour, light entering a window at a specific angle, or a recurring household noise becomes a marker. Cats anticipate based on patterns, not clocks. When these patterns break, their behavior adjusts accordingly. Regularity creates expectation, not routine. Because cats rely so heavily on subtle cues, they are often the first to notice small changes. A new sound in the building, a shift in routine, or a change in emotional atmosphere alters the sensory field. Cats may respond by withdrawing, repositioning, or increasing vigilance. These responses are not emotional reactions in the human sense, but sensory responses to altered information. Change is registered before it is understood. Taken together, these perceptual traits form a coherent system. Cats do not react randomly or selectively for attention. They respond to a world structured by fine detail, contrast, and timing. Their calmness comes not from indifference, but from efficiency. They conserve movement and interaction until the sensory field demands a response. Stillness is part of how they stay aware. Understanding this perceptual world allows us to see cats more clearly. Their behaviors are not puzzles to solve, but signals to read. They act in ways that make sense within their sensory reality, even when that reality differs from our own. This shared space, interpreted differently, is where the quiet relationship between cats and humans continues to unfold. Both sides occupy the same environment, but experience it differently. Cats do not behave randomly. What often appears to humans as inconsistency or unpredictability is, in fact, the result of a highly ordered internal structure. This structure is not built around obedience, instruction, or external rules. Instead, it is shaped by rhythm, territory, and internal regulation. To understand how cats behave, it is necessary to move away from ideas of training and compliance and toward the idea of balance. One of the most visible aspects of feline behavior is the way cats distribute their energy across the day. Unlike humans, who tend to concentrate activity into long continuous periods, cats divide their time into many short cycles. These cycles alternate between rest, observation, movement, and brief bursts of activity. This pattern is not laziness, nor is it inefficiency. It reflects a biological strategy designed to conserve energy while remaining ready to respond. Cats are crepuscular animals, meaning their natural activity peaks occur around dawn and dusk. This pattern aligns with the activity of small prey and with lighting conditions that favor feline vision. Even in modern indoor environments, where food appears on schedule and predators are absent, this rhythm persists. Cats may sleep through much of the day and night, yet remain briefly active during these transitional periods. Their bodies follow internal signals more closely than external schedules. Because of this rhythm, rest plays a central role in feline behavior. Cats sleep not as an escape from activity, but as preparation for it. Sleep allows their nervous systems to reset and remain sensitive. A resting cat is not disengaged. It is conserving resources. This explains why cats often appear suddenly alert after long periods of stillness. Their rest is light, flexible, and easily interrupted. Territory forms another core element of feline behavioral structure. For cats, territory is not defined by ownership in a human sense. It is defined by familiarity and control. A territory is a space where sensory information is predictable. Cats invest time in learning these spaces, walking the same paths, marking surfaces, and observing changes. Once established, a territory becomes an extension of the cat's internal order. Within this territory, cats create zones rather than borders. Some areas are used for rest, others for observation, movement, or retreat. These zones are not chosen randomly. They are selected based on warmth, visibility, sound levels, and safety. A cat returning repeatedly to the same spot is not acting out of habit alone. It is returning to a place that consistently meets its sensory and behavioral needs. Marking behavior supports this structure. Cats use scent marking not primarily to communicate with others, but to stabilize their own environment. Facial rubbing, scratching, and even resting leave chemical traces that reinforce familiarity. These markers tell the cat that the space remains part of its known world. When these markers are removed, such as through cleaning or rearranging furniture, cats often remark areas to restore balance. Routine emerges naturally from this need for stability. Cats build routines not because they are rigid, but because routines reduce uncertainty. When events occur in predictable patterns, less sensory processing is required. Feeding times, movement patterns, and resting locations become anchors. When these anchors are disrupted, cats must expend more energy to reassess their environment, which can lead to visible stress responses. This sensitivity to disruption explains many behaviors that humans label as stubbornness. When a cat refuses to use a new bed, avoids a rearranged room, or reacts strongly to a change in routine, it is not resisting change emotionally. It is responding to a loss of predictability. The structure that once organized its behavior has shifted, and the cat must rebuild it. Social behavior in cats follows similar principles. Cats are not antisocial, but selectively social. They choose interactions based on timing, context, and familiarity. Unlike species that rely on constant group coordination, cats maintain individual autonomy while allowing overlap. This means that social contact is optional rather than required. When a cat initiates interaction, it does so because conditions feel balanced, not because of obligation. This selective approach applies equally to humans. Cats may seek proximity without direct contact, choosing to sit nearby rather than engage physically. This behavior allows them to maintain awareness while limiting sensory input. Physical contact, while sometimes welcome, introduces unpredictability. For a cat, remaining close without being touched often provides the optimal balance. Cats also structure their behavior around control of access. Doors, windows, and elevated surfaces are not just physical features. They are points where control is concentrated. A cat positioned near a doorway can monitor movement between spaces. A cat on a high shelf can observe without interruption. These positions reduce surprise and enhance agency. The concept of agency is critical to understanding feline behavior. Cats need to feel that they can choose when to engage and when to withdraw. This need is not emotional in a human sense. It is regulatory. When a cat loses the ability to control its exposure to stimulation, behavioral issues often emerge. These may include withdrawal, agitation, or increased vigilance. Play behavior also reflects this internal structure. Cats play in ways that mimic hunting sequences: stalking, pausing, chasing, and capturing. These actions are not random bursts of energy. They are rehearsals that maintain coordination between perception and movement. Even in cats that never hunt real prey, play preserves the behavioral framework shaped by evolution. Importantly, cats control the intensity of play. They often stop suddenly, disengage, or switch focus. This self-regulation prevents overstimulation. A cat that ends play abruptly is not bored. It is maintaining balance. This pattern contrasts with animals that rely on external cues to regulate activity. Human interaction sometimes disrupts this structure unintentionally. Continuous attention, forced contact, or unpredictable handling can overwhelm a cat's regulatory systems. When this happens, behavioral signals appear. Tail movement, ear position, body orientation, and withdrawal are all part of a communication system designed to restore equilibrium. The work of ethologists such as Konrad Lorenz and Nico Tinbergen helps frame these behaviors as functional rather than emotional. Behavior, in this view, serves specific purposes: maintaining safety, conserving energy, and preserving internal order. Applying this framework to cats reveals consistency beneath apparent unpredictability. Cats also structure their behavior temporally. They anticipate events based on repeated sequences rather than fixed times. A particular sound before feeding, a pattern of light change, or a familiar human movement becomes meaningful. When these sequences occur out of order, cats adjust. This flexibility allows them to adapt without becoming dependent on rigid schedules. Throughout all of this, one principle remains constant. Cats act to maintain equilibrium. Their behaviors aim to minimize uncertainty, manage sensory input, and preserve control. When these conditions are met, cats appear calm and disengaged. When they are disrupted, behavior changes rapidly. Understanding this structure allows humans to interpret feline behavior more accurately. A cat that withdraws is not rejecting companionship. A cat that repeats actions is not being obsessive. These behaviors are expressions of an internal system seeking stability. When seen through this lens, feline behavior becomes coherent rather than confusing. As we observe cats more closely, patterns emerge. These patterns are not imposed by training or learned through imitation. They arise from a consistent internal logic shaped by evolution and refined through long coexistence with humans. Cats behave the way they do because this structure works. This structural understanding sets the foundation for recognizing why cats have such a calming presence for many people. Their behavior is not chaotic. It is restrained, economical, and deliberate. In the next part, we will continue exploring how this internal order expresses itself in specific, everyday behaviors that people encounter regularly. One of the clearest expressions of this internal structure appears in how cats manage transitions. Moving from rest to activity, from solitude to interaction, or from one space to another rarely happens abruptly. Cats pause, stretch, observe, and adjust before acting. These small rituals are not habits formed through repetition alone. They are behavioral buffers that allow the nervous system to shift states without overload. Feeding behavior follows the same logic. Cats rarely rush toward food without first surveying their surroundings. Even when hungry, many cats pause, look around, and only then begin to eat. This behavior reflects an inherited priority. Safety precedes consumption. In the wild, eating while unaware increases vulnerability. That structure persists even when danger is absent. Grooming is another stabilizing behavior within this system. Cats groom not only for cleanliness, but to regulate sensory input and restore familiarity. Grooming redistributes scent, smooths fur that carries tactile information, and provides repetitive motion that calms the nervous system. After stressful events, such as loud noises or unfamiliar encounters, grooming often increases. It acts as a reset rather than a response to dirt. Cats also manage social interaction through structure rather than emotion. They approach, retreat, and reapproach in measured steps. This pacing allows them to test conditions continuously. If interaction remains predictable, they stay. If it becomes overwhelming, they leave. This pattern often confuses humans, but it reflects consistency rather than indecision. Territorial behavior further reveals this internal order. Cats do not patrol space constantly, but revisit key points at regular intervals. These points are chosen for information density, entrances, corners, elevated surfaces. By checking these locations, cats confirm that their environment remains stable. When changes are detected, behavior adjusts until balance is restored. Vocalization fits into this structure as well. Cats do not meow indiscriminately. Adult cats rarely vocalize to other cats in the wild. Meowing toward humans is a learned behavior, used selectively when other signals fail. It is not the primary communication tool, but a flexible one, deployed only when necessary. Even moments of apparent inactivity serve a purpose. When a cat sits motionless, eyes half closed, it is not disengaged. Sensory systems remain active, scanning for change. This controlled stillness conserves energy while maintaining awareness. It is a behavioral state optimized for readiness rather than rest alone. Taken together, these behaviors reveal a consistent pattern. Cats organize their actions to preserve control, reduce uncertainty, and maintain internal balance. Their behavior is not shaped by impulse, but by regulation. Understanding this structure allows us to see cats not as unpredictable companions, but as animals following a quiet, coherent logic that has remained stable across centuries. The calming effect of cats is rarely dramatic. It does not arrive as a sudden wave or a strong emotional response. Instead, it appears quietly, often without being noticed until it is already present. People frequently report feeling more relaxed around cats without being able to explain why. This sense of calm is not the result of a single factor. It emerges from a combination of sound, movement, rhythm, and absence of demand, all of which align closely with how the human nervous system responds to low stimulation environments. One of the most commonly discussed elements in this experience is the sound of a cat's purr. Purring is not constant, nor is it produced in every situation. Cats purr during rest, social contact, and sometimes even in moments of stress. What makes this sound particularly interesting is its frequency range. Studies have shown that purring typically occurs between 20 and 140 hertz, a range associated in humans with relaxation, muscle release, and steady breathing patterns. The sound is soft, repetitive, and predictable, qualities that the brain processes as non-threatening. Unlike sudden or complex sounds, purring does not demand attention. It exists in the background, allowing the mind to remain unfocused while still aware. This type of sound is similar to ambient noise, such as rainfall or distant waves. It provides sensory input without urgency. For many people, this creates a subtle anchoring effect, helping the nervous system settle without conscious effort. Beyond sound, the movement patterns of cats contribute strongly to their calming presence. Cats move slowly when they are relaxed, conserving energy and avoiding unnecessary motion. Their movements are smooth, economical, and deliberate. Watching a cat stretch, reposition, or walk through a room often feels soothing because these movements lack sharp transitions. The human brain responds positively to predictable motion, especially when it unfolds at a steady pace. Cats also pause frequently. These pauses are not empty moments. They are periods of stillness that allow both the cat and the observer to remain present without stimulation. Stillness, when shared, can feel reassuring. In human interactions, silence often carries tension. In the presence of a cat, silence tends to feel neutral or even comfortable. The cat does not interpret silence as absence, and this attitude subtly transfers to the human nearby. Another important factor is the absence of expectation. Cats do not require conversation, eye contact, or emotional performance. They do not demand reassurance or explanation. This lack of social pressure allows people to relax their own internal monitoring systems. When a cat is nearby, there is no need to respond, impress, or engage continuously. The relationship functions without obligation, which can feel deeply relieving. Physical proximity without direct interaction plays a role as well. Many cats choose to sit near rather than on people. This closeness without contact allows shared space without sensory overload. The human nervous system benefits from the presence of another living being, while the absence of touch prevents overstimulation. This balance mirrors the way cats regulate their own interactions, offering companionship without intrusion. The rhythmic nature of feline behavior also supports calm. Cats follow repeating cycles of rest, observation, and brief activity. These cycles create a predictable environment. Humans, especially in modern life, are often exposed to irregular schedules and constant interruptions. Being near a cat introduces a different temporal pattern, one that emphasizes repetition over urgency. Over time, this rhythm can influence breathing, posture, and attention. There is also evidence that interacting with cats can influence hormonal responses. Gentle contact and quiet presence have been associated with increased oxytocin levels in some individuals. Oxytocin is commonly linked to bonding and stress reduction. Importantly, this response does not require intense interaction. It often occurs during calm, low-effort moments, such as sitting quietly or resting near a cat. The parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for rest and recovery, is more likely to activate in environments with low stimulation and predictable sensory input. Cats naturally create such environments. Their sounds are soft, their movements measured, and their presence non-intrusive. These qualities reduce the need for constant vigilance, allowing the body to shift away from alert states. Visual elements also matter. The sight of a resting cat with slow breathing and relaxed posture provides a visual cue of safety. Humans are highly responsive to visual signals of calm in other beings. Seeing an animal at ease suggests that the environment is stable. This perception can reduce unconscious stress responses, even when a person is not actively thinking about it. Cats also contribute to calm through their boundaries. They approach and withdraw based on comfort, modeling a form of interaction that respects limits. This behavior can feel reassuring, especially for individuals who experience social fatigue. A cat's ability to disengage without conflict demonstrates that closeness does not require constant engagement. Importantly, the calming effect of cats does not depend on affection alone. Many people feel relaxed simply by sharing space with a cat, even without touch or sound. This suggests that presence itself plays a role. The steady existence of another being, moving independently yet predictably, provides a grounding reference point. In therapeutic and care settings, cats have been observed to create quieter atmospheres. Their presence often slows conversations and reduces movement. Unlike animals that actively seek engagement, cats allow the environment to remain subdued. This quality makes them particularly well-suited to spaces intended for rest or reflection. Cats also encourage attentiveness to small moments. Their behaviors are subtle and easily missed. Observing them requires slowing down, noticing small shifts, and paying attention without expectation. This mode of attention aligns closely with mindfulness practices, which emphasize awareness without judgment or urgency. The absence of vocal demand is another factor. Cats do not communicate constantly. Their vocalizations are limited and purposeful. This reduces auditory clutter and allows silence to remain intact. In contrast to environments filled with continuous sound, the quiet presence of a cat feels spacious. Over time, living with cats can influence how people relate to rest itself. Cats normalize inactivity. They demonstrate that rest does not need justification. A cat sleeping in daylight does not appear unproductive or lazy. It appears balanced. This visual reminder can subtly challenge cultural ideas that equate constant activity with value. The calming effect of cats is cumulative rather than immediate. It builds through repeated exposure to low-stimulation interaction. This is why people often describe missing the presence of a cat more than specific actions. What is missed is not a behavior, but a state of being that the cat helped sustain. This state is not excitement, affection, or entertainment. It is equilibrium. Cats offer an example of how to exist without urgency, how to engage without pressure, and how to rest without guilt. Their calming influence is not taught or performed. It is simply lived. These calming qualities do not remain limited to single moments. Over time, living alongside cats subtly reshapes how people experience rest, attention, and quiet presence. The influence deepens gradually, unfolding through repetition rather than intensity, and becoming part of the background rhythm of everyday life. Living alongside cats does not only influence how people feel in quiet moments. Over time, it can subtly reshape how attention itself is used. Cats do not demand focus. They allow attention to drift, settle, and return naturally. This kind of shared presence teaches a different way of being alert without being tense, aware without being strained. Living alongside cats does not only influence how people feel in quiet moments. Over time, it can subtly reshape how attention itself is used. Cats do not demand focus. They allow attention to drift, settle, and return naturally. This kind of shared presence teaches a different way of being alert without being tense, aware without being strained. One reason this works is that cats rarely interrupt. Their behaviors fit into the background rather than breaking it. A cat stretching, shifting position, or moving across a room does not pull attention sharply. Instead, it creates a gentle visual rhythm that the brain can register without fully engaging. This low-level engagement supports relaxation rather than distraction. Cats also model a relationship with time that contrasts strongly with human habits. They do not rush from one state to another. Transitions are slow, often marked by pauses, stretching, or stillness. Observing this pattern repeatedly can influence how people move between activities, encouraging softer transitions and reducing the sense of urgency that often carries from task to task. Breathing patterns are another subtle area of influence. A resting cat breathes slowly and evenly with minimal movement. Humans are highly responsive to breathing cues in other beings, even unconsciously. Sitting near a calm animal can encourage slower breathing and reduced muscle tension, especially when there is no conversation or eye contact demanding response. The predictability of cats also plays a role. While their behavior is independent, it follows consistent internal rules. This consistency creates a sense of reliability. Knowing that a cat will not suddenly demand attention or react unpredictably allows the nervous system to relax its monitoring. In environments where many stimuli compete for attention, this reliability becomes especially valuable. Cats also respect distance in a way that many humans find comforting. They approach when they choose, withdraw when they need to, and do not interpret withdrawal as conflict. This normalizes the idea that closeness and distance can coexist without emotional consequence. For people who experience social fatigue, this can be deeply reassuring. Another calming factor is the absence of evaluation. Cats do not judge productivity, mood, or engagement. They respond to presence rather than performance. This allows people to rest without feeling observed or assessed. In the presence of a cat, there is no expectation to explain tiredness, silence, or stillness. Over longer periods, these small experiences accumulate. Living with cats can shift how people relate to quiet itself. Silence becomes less empty and more inhabited. Stillness feels shared rather than lonely. The presence of a cat can make rest feel intentional rather than accidental. Cats also reinforce the idea that calm does not need justification. They rest openly and frequently, without apology or explanation. This visible comfort with inactivity can gently challenge internal pressure to remain constantly active. Over time, this can change how people allow themselves to pause. What makes this influence particularly effective is that it is not instructional. Cats do not teach calm through guidance or example in the human sense. They simply exist in a way that supports balance. Their calming effect is absorbed rather than learned, experienced rather than analyzed. This quiet influence explains why cats often feel especially suited to nighttime environments. As external stimulation decreases, their steady presence becomes more noticeable. Without competing noise or activity, their rhythms align naturally with rest, allowing calm to deepen without effort. Living with cats today is not a modern invention. It is the continuation of a relationship that has already proven itself across thousands of years, now unfolding inside apartments, cities, and digital routines. What has changed is not the cat, but the environment. Walls are closer, sounds are sharper, light behaves differently, and time moves faster. Yet cats remain largely the same, adapting quietly without asking the world to slow down for them. In modern homes, Cats shape their lives around space rather than rules. They choose where to rest, where to observe, and where to withdraw. A windowsill becomes a lookout, a shelf becomes a refuge, a quiet corner becomes a place of regulation. These choices are not random. They reflect the same priorities that guided cats in ancient settlements: visibility, safety, predictability, and control over sensory input. Urban life introduces constant noise, movement, and artificial light. For many animals, this level of stimulation would be overwhelming. Cats respond differently. They reduce exposure rather than resisting it. They sleep more deeply during the day, shift activity to quieter hours, and retreat into vertical or enclosed spaces. Their ability to regulate interaction allows them to coexist with busy human schedules without demanding change. Indoor living has not removed cats from their instincts. It has simply redirected them. Hunting becomes play. Territory becomes rooms and furniture. Observation replaces roaming. Even in small apartments, cats map their environment carefully, creating internal routes and preferred zones. This is why rearranging a room can feel disruptive to a cat. The space must be relearned, not because it is unfamiliar, but because it no longer communicates in the same way. Different breeds express this adaptability in slightly different ways. Larger breeds, such as the Maine Coon, often appear more tolerant of shared space, adjusting easily to human routines while maintaining independence. Breeds like the Siamese tend to be more vocal and socially responsive, not because they seek constant attention, but because their communication style evolved around closer human proximity. More reserved breeds, such as the British Shorthair, often align naturally with quiet environments, preferring steady presence over interaction. These differences do not override the core structure of feline behavior. They simply emphasize certain traits over others. Regardless of breed, cats continue to prioritize balance. They approach when conditions feel right and withdraw when stimulation becomes excessive. This consistency allows them to live alongside humans without friction, even in environments that change rapidly. Technology has introduced new rhythms into daily life. Screens glow late into the night, devices produce constant sound, and schedules shift unpredictably. Cats respond by anchoring themselves to more stable cues. The angle of light through a window, the familiar sound of footsteps, or the quiet hours of early morning become markers of safety. In this way, cats often maintain a sense of continuity that humans themselves struggle to preserve. Living with cats also changes how people experience home. A space shared with a cat rarely feels empty. Even when the cat is resting or out of sight, its presence is felt as potential rather than demand. This low-pressure companionship can be especially grounding in a world filled with alerts, messages, and expectations. The cat does not ask for productivity. It does not require explanation. It simply exists. Over time, this shared existence reshapes daily habits. People move more quietly, notice smaller details, and become more aware of transitions between activity and rest. The cat's rhythm subtly influences the household rhythm, not by instruction, but by example. Rest becomes visible, acceptable, and shared. Modern veterinary care and research have expanded understanding of feline needs, emphasizing environmental enrichment over control. Simple additions, such as vertical spaces, quiet hiding areas, and predictable routines, support the cat's internal structure. These adjustments benefit humans as well, creating calmer, more intentional living spaces. Despite the complexity of modern life, cats remain remarkably low-demand companions. They do not require constant engagement, nor do they withdraw completely. They occupy the space between presence and absence, offering companionship without pressure. This balance may explain why cats continue to thrive in cities, where space is limited and time feels scarce. In a world increasingly defined by speed and noise, cats represent a different mode of existence. They remind us that attention does not need to be constant, that rest does not need to be earned, and that closeness does not require performance. Living with cats today is not about ownership or control. It is about coexistence. This coexistence works because it always has. Cats adapted to human life without losing themselves, and humans learned gradually to make space for that independence. The relationship did not deepen through instruction or force, but through time, observation, and mutual adjustment. As night settles and activity slows, the presence of a cat often becomes more noticeable. The quiet weight on a nearby surface, the slow rhythm of breathing, the occasional movement through shadow. These are not events that demand attention. They are signals that the environment is safe enough to rest. And so, living with cats today feels much like it always has. Shared space, shared silence, separate rhythms moving alongside one another. In this quiet arrangement, nothing needs to be explained or resolved. The relationship continues simply because it works, unfolding calmly, moment by moment, through the long hours of the night. Living with cats today also means learning to read small adjustments rather than dramatic signals. Modern cats often communicate comfort or discomfort through subtle changes in posture, location, and timing. A cat choosing a different sleeping spot, shifting its daily route through the home, or spending more time near a window is often responding to changes that humans barely notice. These behaviors are not random. They reflect ongoing negotiation between the cat and its environment. In many homes, cats develop distinct relationships with specific spaces. A kitchen may become active territory during quiet hours, while a bedroom becomes a retreat during the day. Some cats prefer enclosed spaces, such as boxes or covered beds, while others choose open, elevated areas. These preferences are not personality quirks alone. They reflect how each cat manages stimulation, visibility, and control within a shared environment. Light plays a particularly important role in modern indoor life. Cats often position themselves where natural light enters the home, tracking the slow movement of sunlight across walls and floors. These light patterns help anchor their sense of time in environments where outdoor cues are limited. A sunny spot is not just warmth, but information. Breed tendencies can sometimes make these patterns more visible. A Bengal cat, for example, often shows a stronger need for movement and exploration, using vertical space more actively. A ragdoll may tolerate prolonged proximity and physical contact more easily, settling into shared spaces without frequent withdrawal. These differences do not change the underlying structure of feline behavior, but they influence how it is expressed in daily life. Other breeds express their adaptation more quietly. A British Shorthair may choose a consistent resting place and return to it day after day, favoring stability over novelty. A Siamese cat may position itself closer to human activity, responding more readily to voices and movement. In each case, the behavior reflects the same internal logic, expressed through slightly different emphasis. Age also shapes modern coexistence. Younger cats often test boundaries, explore constantly, and adjust routes frequently as they learn their environment. Older cats tend to reduce exploration, focusing instead on maintaining a few reliable spaces. This shift is not a loss of curiosity, but a refinement of priorities. Familiarity becomes more valuable than novelty, and stability outweighs stimulation. Cats living entirely indoors adapt their sensory world carefully. Without outdoor cues, they rely more heavily on light patterns, household sounds, and human routines. A cat may begin to associate the hum of a device, the sound of keys, or a change in lighting with specific moments in the day. These associations help replace environmental signals that would otherwise come from outside. Modern households often include multiple people with different schedules. Cats respond by anchoring themselves to the most consistent elements rather than individuals. A cat may sleep through busy periods and become active when the home quiets. This adaptability allows cats to live comfortably in environments that would overwhelm more socially demanding animals. Living with cats also highlights the importance of choice. Cats thrive when they can decide where to be, when to interact, and when to withdraw. Providing options rather than instructions supports this need. Multiple resting areas, access to height, and quiet retreat spaces allow cats to regulate themselves without conflict. When these options exist, behavior problems often decrease naturally. Over time, people living with cats often adjust their own habits in response. Movements become slower, voices softer, and routines more predictable. This adjustment rarely feels forced. It happens gradually, shaped by shared space rather than conscious effort. The home becomes organized around coexistence rather than control. In many modern homes, cats have become quiet regulators of daily pace. A cat settling near a workspace, choosing a spot beside a couch, or appearing briefly during moments of rest often influences how people pause, even without noticing it. These small interruptions are not demands. They are reminders of an alternative rhythm, one that does not compete with productivity or urgency. Examples of this appear clearly in everyday routines. A cat sitting beside someone working late at night often encourages slower movements and longer pauses. A cat stretching and resettling during a quiet evening subtly shifts attention away from screens. These moments do not require interaction. Their effect comes from presence alone, offering a reference point that is steady rather than stimulating. This role becomes even more noticeable in dense urban life. In small apartments in busy cities, cats adapt to limited space while preserving calm. They choose vertical areas, corners, and quiet zones that reduce sensory overload. By doing so, they demonstrate how balance can exist even in compressed environments. This adaptability allows cats to remain grounding companions in places where stillness is otherwise rare. Some long-established breeds express calm through stillness rather than movement. Persian cats tend to prefer low-stimulation environments, choosing soft surfaces and quiet corners instead of constant exploration. Their slower pace and reduced need for novelty make them well-suited to homes where silence and routine dominate. Rather than actively monitoring their surroundings, they settle into familiar spaces and remain there for long periods, reinforcing a sense of quiet stability. Not all behavioral differences come from breed alone. Coat patterns can also influence how cats move through space. Tabby cats, defined by their distinctive striped or patterned coats, are often highly adaptable and environmentally aware. They tend to memorize routes quickly, adjust easily to changes in household rhythm, and move confidently between rooms. These tendencies are not rules, but recurring patterns shaped by long-term adaptation. Other breeds express balance through proximity and attentiveness. Exotic shorthairs often combine a relaxed temperament with gentle social interest, remaining nearby without constant interaction. Sphinx cats, lacking fur, frequently seek warmth and closeness, positioning themselves near people or heat sources while still regulating contact. Korat cats are known for quiet alertness, often observing from consistent locations with minimal movement. In each case, the expression differs, but the underlying structure of calm and self-regulation remains the same. Across all these variations, what remains consistent is not appearance or temperament, but structure. Cats adapt to modern life without abandoning their internal balance. Whether active or reserved, social or distant, each cat navigates the shared environment by choosing when to engage and when to withdraw. This freedom of choice allows calm to emerge naturally, without effort or control. The calm is not created by behavior, but by the space behavior leaves open. Living alongside cats often teaches this balance indirectly. Humans begin to notice quieter moments, slower transitions, and the value of pause. The presence of a cat does not demand attention, yet it gently reshapes how attention is held. Over time, this shared rhythm becomes familiar, creating a sense of steadiness within the home. What changes first is not routine, but awareness. As night deepens, the movements of cats grow fewer, and their presence becomes more subtle, marked by a quiet shift of position or a soft breath crossing the room. These moments do not interrupt rest, but move alongside it, allowing the space to settle into something shared and unspoken. The story of cats continues as it always has, not through commands or explanations, but through coexistence, two rhythms aligned without force. Nothing is required, nothing is asked for. In this calm arrangement, rest arrives naturally,